I stood on the platform at the yearly hardware suppliers gathering in Charlotte when I glanced down and noticed my son's face turn completely pale. He sat at the VIP table in the third row. He wore a Cornerstone Supply name tag on his jacket. He had spent the morning shaking hands and presenting himself to suppliers and distributors as the next leader of the company, and now he watched his 67-year-old father approach the stage to receive the Industry Pioneer Award in front of every important person in that hall. I met his eyes for just a moment, long enough for him to grasp it. Then I faced the microphone. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me go back roughly 2 weeks. My name is Leonard Whitfield. I am 67 years old. I devoted 30 years to creating Cornerstone Supply from scratch. I began with a welding torch, a second-hand pickup truck, and a lease on a 900-square-foot unit in a strip mall on the outskirts of Charlotte. I installed the shelving myself. I operated the cash register alone for the first 6 months. I handled deliveries on weekends because I couldn't pay for another worker. By the time I finished, Cornerstone Supply operated 14 stores across the Carolinas and held a standing that required 3 decades to establish. My wife Ruth stood beside me through every step. She managed the accounting for the first 4 years until we could hire a professional. She answered calls while I traveled. She delivered sandwiches to the store on Saturdays when she knew I would skip lunch once more. Ruth died 4 years ago. Pancreatic cancer. We had 8 weeks from the diagnosis until the end. After she left us, my son Gareth invited me to live with him. He said he wanted me nearby. He claimed he wanted to master the business from the basics and that my presence would assist. He and his wife Nadine had plenty of room. It seemed logical on paper. I sold my downtown penthouse. I moved into their guest bedroom. I granted Gareth a vice president position at Cornerstone Supply and began guiding him through the daily operations. That was my initial error. Not the move itself, not the title. Trusting that Gareth truly wanted to understand the work. What Gareth actually wanted was to receive everything without effort. There is a clear distinction. The morning matters reached their peak began like any other. I rose at 6:30 and sat at the kitchen island with my coffee and the week's purchase orders. I had followed that same habit for 40 years. Coffee, orders, a peaceful hour before everything began. Nadine entered around 7. She offered no greeting. She walked to the counter, picked up my mug, and emptied it into the sink without speaking. "We require that counter area for the Keurig station," she stated. I examined the counter. Nothing stood there. No Keurig station, only the spot where my mug had rested. I remained silent. A minute later, Gareth appeared. He stared at his phone. He poured himself coffee from the machine Nadine had cleared space for and leaned against the counter without looking my way. "Dad," he said, eyes still on his screen. "We've discussed it and believe we must alter the setup. Look, you're in the way. Nadine feels she cannot host guests. You leave your equipment in the garage. You claim the best parking space." He finally raised his eyes. "We've been tolerant, but you're not really adding anything here. You're basically dead weight at this stage." Dead weight. I recalled the 3 shifts I worked the year Gareth was born so we could cover the hospital costs. I remembered the weekend I missed Ruth's birthday because I needed to finalize a deal that paid Gareth's private school fees for the following 2 years. I reflected on every choice I had made without protest, so my son would enjoy chances I never received. I considered the mortgage on this house, which I had covered through a holding company for 2 years, so Gareth would never sense the burden. I thought about the 2 vehicle payments handled through those same accounts, the 3 credit cards, the country club membership Nadine had arranged 6 months earlier that I had never mentioned. Then Nadine crossed her arms and remarked, "There are several pleasant assisted living facilities close by. You would be among people your own age, Leonard." Gareth nodded. "It's not personal, Dad. You've simply ceased being useful." I sat with those words for a moment. Then I replied, You're correct. This isn't functioning. I rose, walked down the hallway to the guest room, and opened the closet. The suitcase waited there, already packed. I had prepared it 5 days earlier, the evening Gareth joked at dinner about placing me somewhere with a nurse available. I understood then. I simply needed them to act first. I lifted the suitcase and returned through the living room. Gareth shouted after me, asking where I was headed. I gave no reply. I stepped out the front door of the house I had constructed with my own hands in 1987. I continued down the driveway without turning around. Floyd waited at the curb. He had worked for me for 20 years. He understood the strategy. "Good morning, Mr. Whitfield," he said, taking the suitcase. I climbed into the back seat. "The Omni," I instructed, "and contact Harold. Tell him it's time." Harold Cole had served as my lawyer for 18 years. He was the type of person who answered on the first ring and avoided pointless questions. By the time Floyd reached the Omni, Harold had already begun. Phase 1 proved straightforward. Sever the financial connections. Every credit card Gareth and Nadine used was a secondary card linked to accounts I oversaw. The payments for the Range Rover and Nadine's Audi came from an automatic draft on a trust Harold directed. The house mortgage flowed through a shell company I established years earlier, precisely so Gareth would never notice my name on the statements. The country club fees, the grocery delivery services, the streaming platforms, the fitness memberships, all of it depended on my funds through accounts Gareth had never examined carefully enough to question. Harold placed 4 calls and sent 2 emails. By noon, every one of those connections had been halted. I sat in my hotel room eating lunch when the first call arrived from Gareth. I allowed it to reach voicemail, then the second. By 3 that afternoon, he had phoned 11 times. I flipped the phone face down on the desk and observed the screen illuminate. That evening, Nadine attempted to use her card at a restaurant. It was declined. Gareth tried his at a fuel station. Declined. He contacted the bank and spoke with an agent who explained the accounts had been marked for examination by the main account owner. The agent could reveal nothing further. I know this because Harold had prepared the bank's compliance group beforehand. That night, the automatic mortgage payment did not go through. The lender issued a notice. The electricity and water remained active because those bills had been settled a month in advance, but Gareth and Nadine were beginning to realize the ground under them was not as stable as they had believed. Now let me describe the trap. I had been aware for roughly 14 months that Gareth struggled with gambling, mostly sports wagering through several online sites. He owed approximately $38,000. He had hidden it by taking small sums from his Cornerstone supply expense account. Never large enough to prompt a complete review, but sufficient that my head accountant Frank Delgado had noticed a pattern and informed me discreetly. I possessed the records. I merely required Gareth to take an action I could document. The locked study in the house had remained forbidden the entire period I resided there. I informed Gareth it contained old machinery and storage boxes from the company's beginning days. He had never insisted on entry, but I knew that once the funds ceased, he would search for anything usable. So Harold positioned a folder inside the unlocked drawer in that room. The folder carried a clear label: Cornerstone Franchise Expansion, pre-signed agreements for 3 new sites. Inside appeared to be fully completed franchise contracts, including account numbers and routing data. The papers were fabricated but looked completely authentic. The account numbers and routing information had been pre-registered with 2 banks and a fraud detection service. If anyone attempted to employ those contracts as security, the request would be marked within the hour, recorded with timestamps, and forwarded to Harold. I also maintained a camera in the hallway outside the study. I had set up the system years earlier following a burglary nearby. Gareth never knew the camera existed. It required 2 days. The recording captured Gareth entering the study at 11:00 p.m. on a Tuesday. He located the folder. He remained inside roughly 6 minutes. He emerged with his phone and placed a call in the hallway, his back to the camera, but his posture revealed everything. Shoulders hunched, voice quiet, nodding. By Wednesday morning, Gareth had entered a branch of First Carolina Bank and offered the franchise agreements as security for a $50,000 personal loan. He informed the loan officer the assets belonged to his family's firm and that he possessed permission to use them. The loan officer checked the account numbers. The fraud alert appeared within 40 minutes. The officer contacted the listed number, which connected to Harold's office. Harold verified that no such permission existed and that the documents had been flagged as possible fraudulent items. The bank documented the full exchange: timestamps, papers shown, statements from the applicant. Gareth departed the bank without the loan. I viewed the security recording from my laptop at the Omni. He remained seated in his car in the bank lot for about 20 minutes before leaving. I suppose he was considering his following step. I suppose he still thought another option existed. It did not. Harold now possessed video evidence of Gareth removing documents from my private study, bank records of him trying to leverage fake instruments as security, and 14 months of expense account discrepancies recorded by Frank Delgado. In addition, Dr. Clifton Mercer at Carolina's Medical had finished a complete mental assessment on me the previous week. MRI, memory tests, the entire series. His official report stated 99th percentile cognitive ability for my age range, completely capable of handling my own financial and personal matters. Nadine had been informing others for months that I was losing my edge, that I became confused easily, that perhaps I should not be relied upon for business choices. Dr. Mercer's report sealed that possibility before Gareth could attempt it. The convention took place in 4 days. I had one final arrangement to complete before then. Before I reached the convention, I want to share what occurred when Gareth searched for me. He assumed I had no money. That was the key point. In his view, I was a 67-year-old retired man exhausting whatever funds remained, likely staying at a cheap motel on the South Side, eating cheap meals and feeling regretful. He had never considered that his image of me could be mistaken. He employed a private investigator. I learned afterward the man billed him $400 daily, which Gareth paid in cash since his cards were blocked. The investigator located me at the Omni within 2 days. He informed Gareth that the old man occupied a downtown hotel, probably wasting his remaining savings on a whim. Gareth and Nadine drove downtown the following morning. I know their appearance when they entered the lobby because Floyd sat in the car across the street and described it to me later. Gareth in a creased dress shirt, Nadine wearing sunglasses she likely believed made her seem steady. They had gone without hot water at the house for 2 days by then. The water heater depended on an account that had been stopped. They approached the front desk and requested Leonard Whitfield's room number. The concierge explained he could not provide guest details. Gareth claimed he was my son, and that it involved a family crisis. The concierge phoned my room. I instructed him to have them wait in the lobby. I took my time finishing my coffee. When I descended, I wore a suit, not rented, not purchased for the moment. A suit I had owned for 6 years, crafted by a tailor in Raleigh who had created my clothing since the early 2000s. It fit the way a suit fits when tailored exactly for the wearer. Gareth stared at it. I sat down opposite them in the lobby lounge area. A server delivered a cup of tea without request. That was the level of service at that hotel. Gareth regained his composure first. He leaned in and spoke quietly. "Dad, this has continued long enough. The cards, the mortgage, everything. You must resolve this today." "I don't need to do anything," I replied. "You're acting unreasonably. You're humiliating yourself by spending money you lack on a hotel like this." Nadine interrupted. "Leonard, we're prepared to move past this. We realize you were angry, but you need to return home and restore things to normal." I studied her. Then I studied Gareth. I remembered the coffee mug in the sink. I remembered the phrase, dead weight. I remembered the word, useful, and how my son had applied it as a test of whether I deserved space. The house belongs to me, Gareth, I said. It has always been mine. You resided there because I permitted it. That setup is concluding. You cannot simply reclaim the house. Review the deed, I said. Harold Cole will contact you regarding the schedule. Gareth's face changed in the familiar way when events turned against him. Red at the neck, jaw clenched, eyes narrowing with anger. You want to know what I believe? He said, his voice growing loud enough that nearby guests looked over. I believe you've lost control. I believe you're confused and suspicious and making choices that will damage you, and I believe if I consult a physician, they would support me. I reached into my jacket pocket and withdrew a folded paper, Dr. Clifton Mercer's assessment. I set it on the table between us. You're roughly 2 weeks behind on that notion, I said. Gareth lifted it. He read the opening paragraph. His jaw relaxed. Nadine peered at the document over his shoulder. She stayed silent. She simply leaned back in her seat as if energy had drained from her. I rose. You have 72 hours to clear your personal items from the property. Harold will provide a complete inventory. Anything absent from the list remains with the house. I returned to the elevator. I did not glance back. That afternoon, Gareth drove to the Cornerstone Supply regional office on the east side of Charlotte. He still carried his keycard. He still held his parking spot. He remained vice president of operations, at least officially, and he planned to employ that position for action. What he discovered was that his keycard no longer granted entry to the executive suite door. The IT team had revoked his system privileges 2 days earlier. He could enter the main area, the warehouse, the break room, but he could not reach the financial records, the supplier agreements, or the purchasing files. He questioned the office manager, a woman named Beverly who had served Cornerstone for 11 years, about the situation. Beverly informed him an authorization check had begun from the chairman's office and that she could not provide further information. Gareth stood in the lobby of the company his father had established and attempted to appear in command. Beverly observed him with the sort of calm developed after witnessing much and ceasing to be shocked by most things. He departed without saying a great deal. I monitored the parking lot camera from my laptop. He remained in his car for some time. Then he left. The convention occurred in 2 days. The annual Hardware Suppliers Convention lasts 3 days each fall at the Convention Center in Uptown Charlotte. Every significant supplier, distributor, and regional chain in the Southeast dispatches representatives. Deals are finalized. Connections are formed. Reputations are created or silently damaged. Gareth had joined the previous 2 years as my delegate. He occupied a seat at the VIP table each time. He navigated the space the way he always did, assured and vocal, informing others that Cornerstone Supply was advancing into a fresh phase. He permitted people to draw conclusions without outright falsehoods. He excelled at that. This year he had registered once more, same table, same name tag. He arrived on the first morning in a suit that now appeared slightly oversized, shook hands with suppliers he recognized, and placed himself near the front of the room as usual. He remained unaware I would attend until he noticed the printed schedule on his table during the opening lunch. Industry Pioneer Award, presented to Leonard Whitfield, founder and chairman, Cornerstone Supply. I was informed later that he read it twice and then turned it face down on the table. I entered through a side door with Harold and Floyd. We had planned it intentionally. I wanted to be inside and seated at the main table before Gareth spotted me. I wanted him to have no opportunity to ready himself. The room held about 400 people, round tables, white tablecloths, the quiet hum of business talk and coffee cups. I had visited that space many times over the years. I recognized half the attendees. The other half knew my name. I sat at the head table with the event coordinators and two regional presidents from national supply networks we had partnered with for years. We shook hands. We discussed the market, ordinary talk. Then the program commenced. The master of ceremonies was a trade writer who reported on the building supply sector, a man named Clifford Baines who had spoken with me twice before. He performed his role well. He knew how to command attention. He presented the award by describing what it signified to construct something from nothing in an industry that consumes small businesses. He spoke of remaining independent while large chains acquired everyone. He spoke of the type of standing built across decades, not quarters. Then he announced my name. I stood and walked to the podium. As I passed, I glanced at the third row. Gareth sat motionless. Nadine sat beside him, her hand resting on the table ahead of her. They both watched me as if trying to comprehend something unexpected. I adjusted the microphone and addressed the audience. I kept the speech brief. I thanked the suppliers who had remained with us in the beginning when we were unknown. I thanked Frank Delgado for maintaining honest records for 15 years. I referenced Ruth without elaboration, simply noting that none of it would have happened without her. Then I nodded toward Harold, who stood near the side aisle. Harold approached the third row. He stopped at Gareth's table and set a manila envelope in front of him. Quietly, without drama. Just placed it and withdrew. Gareth stared at the envelope. He looked at Harold. He looked at me. I held his gaze briefly, then returned to the audience to conclude my comments. Behind me, I heard Gareth opening the envelope. I heard the rustle of paper. I heard Nadine speak softly. I heard Gareth's chair push back. He rose. "Dad." His voice carried loudly enough that nearby tables fell silent. I paused at the podium. "This is an eviction notice," Gareth said. He held the documents up. His voice carried that particular tone it took when he attempted to sound composed but failed. "You're delivering me an eviction notice during a convention." The room had grown completely quiet, all 400 people. I looked at him. "The document explains itself, Gareth. You have 72 hours from the moment of delivery. Harold can address any questions about the procedure." "This is crazy. That house is my home. I've lived there for years." "You've stayed there for years," I said. "There is a difference. You can examine the deed with your lawyer." Gareth scanned the room. He searched for understanding, for support, for anything he could employ. What he encountered was a room of people who had just observed a man accept a Lifetime Achievement Award being interrupted by someone questioning why he must vacate a house he apparently did not own. Two convention security officers were already heading down the aisle. Nadine seized Gareth's arm. She proved wiser than him in that instant. She recognized that the audience had already decided. She tugged at him. He hesitated briefly, then allowed her to lead him toward the exit. The doors shut behind them. Clifford Baines returned to the auxiliary microphone at the side of the stage and cleared his throat. "Well," he said, "Leonard, I believe we all just witnessed a real-time example of why the Pioneer Award includes a character requirement." The room laughed. I smiled. Someone began applauding, and it quickly spread. I completed my comments. I thanked the audience. I returned to my seat, sipped a glass of water, and discussed lumber prices for the fourth quarter with the man beside me. Outside in the parking lot, Gareth remained in his car for 40 minutes before departing. Floyd observed him leaving. He said he appeared like a man who had suddenly realized the structure he occupied stood on another person's property, which, to be accurate, described the situation precisely. The legal proceedings required about 4 months from beginning to conclusion. Harold submitted the civil case for financial misuse the week following the convention. Frank Delgado's 14 months of expense account records served as Exhibit A. The bank inquiry from First Carolina Bank served as Exhibit B. The hallway camera recording from the study served as Exhibit C. Gareth's lawyer attempted to claim I had entrapped him. Harold permitted the argument. Then Harold presented the footage. 38 seconds of Gareth entering a room he had been clearly told was restricted, opening a filing cabinet that did not belong to him, and departing with documents that were not his. The judge had little to add afterward. Gareth was removed from his vice president role at Cornerstone Supply by court ruling. He was ordered to repay $38,000 in misused funds, plus legal expenses. The bank fraud matter proceeded separately, which I did not involve myself in. That concerned Gareth, the bank, and whatever lawyer he could manage by then. The house returned to my exclusive use. It had never legally been otherwise. Nadine departed roughly 6 weeks after the resolution. I learned of it through Floyd, who heard it from Beverly at the office. No specifics, only that she had left. I did not find it unexpected. She had wed a man she thought stood beside wealth. When that wealth proved to belong to someone else and that person had shut the door, little reason remained to stay. I want to describe the day I returned to the house. It was a Saturday morning in February, about 3 months after the trial. I drove there alone, without Floyd, just me and the truck. The house stood empty. Harold had arranged for the locks to be replaced and the utilities to remain active during the review. I entered through the front door and paused in the living room. I had constructed that space in 1987. I was 27 years old that summer. I poured the foundation myself with 2 friends from the factory and a rented concrete mixer. I framed the walls across 3 weekends. I installed the wiring with my father-in-law, an electrician who traveled from Greensboro to assist. Ruth painted every room herself because we could not pay for professionals. Standing there in February, the house felt silent, chilly, and entirely motionless. I walked to the garage. On the back wall, on 2 nails I had driven myself more than 30 years earlier, hung the hammer I had used to frame those walls. It was an old Estwing with a wooden handle smoothed by use, its head marked by genuine work. Nadine had wanted to discard it about a year into our arrangement. She called it junk. I had told her it would remain. It still hung there. I removed it and held it for a moment. Then I placed it in the truck. That hammer now rests on the credenza in my office at Cornerstone Supply headquarters. People occasionally inquire about it. I explain that it is the first tool I purchased with my own earnings, that it constructed the first walls I ever built, and that it reminds me each morning why the effort counts. That is the truth. About 2 years after the trial, a letter reached Harold's office. A plain white envelope, no sender address, mailed from Charlotte. Harold sent it to me on the boat. It came from Nadine. She worked at a marketing company in South End and rented an apartment independently. She wrote that she now comprehended her role in what had occurred, that she had encouraged Gareth in ways she should not have, and that she sought nothing, only wished me to know she regretted it. I read it twice. Then I placed it in the desk drawer on the boat beside the photograph of Ruth and me from the day we opened store number 3. Ruth laughs in the image because I had paint on my face from assisting with the front window trim that morning and had not realized it until she mentioned it exactly when the photo was taken. I have not received any direct message from Gareth. Perhaps I will one day. Perhaps not. That decision belongs to him. What I understand is this: I constructed something genuine. I built it with my hands, Ruth's support, and 30 years of early mornings and choices that demanded sacrifices I never discussed. I provided my son every benefit I lacked. I gave him a title, a salary, a place at a table that required me 2 decades to secure. And when he concluded I was dead weight, I exited the front door of my own house with a prepared suitcase and allowed him to discover the difficult truth about what that weight had actually supported. If someone in your life is accepting what you created as a given, you already sense it. You have sensed it for some time. The real question is what action you will take. Dignity is not recovered through debate.